Assalamualaikum Sai.
Walaikum salam.
कैसे हैं? ठीक है.
Alhamdulillah.
We've pulled you in for a quick discussion. All right. The name is catching up on everybody's tongue. Literally, ठीक है. We know that people look up to you. All right, because you are you bring with yourself a pure psychology background. ठीक है. And people have a way of coming to you and learning things around. ठीक है. Source code. Where does source code come in, or what made you open up a company, training institute with a very scientific approach towards things, towards training, towards leadership, towards call it? I think you're all, we've got a lot of questions for you. Tell us something about the inception of source code.
Source code is a way to reproduce success. If you do not know the technique, the science behind how we did it the first time, we won't be able to replicate it. To create successors, to recreate leaders, to make sure when you leave a company, then the company and the team stays intact, the performance still is, at its best. There has to be a code through which you're doing that whole success, producing those success statements. And if there is no code, that means, as soon as you're going to leave, everything's going to fall apart. And people love that, by the way. That, it was because of me. And this is pure narcissism. This is a base syndrome. People, true leaders, they make sure that the movement, stays after they're gone as well. Because their movement is bigger than them. It is larger than life. And this is why it is their purpose. And it is worth giving their life for, hence larger than life. So source code is an attempt to make sure that people know the science of how to get things done rather than the art. So new comers can actually come and learn of how the successful people did it the first time or every time.
Right. We've seen a number of articles handwritten by you. We've gone through them. We've had some discussions over them in the past as well. We just want to touch base on sales, the therapy that you introduced for sales. We've been hearing things, of course, we know already sales is some talent that a person brings in naturally with it. Mm-hmm. Where does therapy come in?
Well, if sales was such a natural talent, and I'm not denying there is no flavor of talent in there, but it was just all talent, then you would have seen the same salespeople perform every single cycle, successfully. Since, when you draw out a bell curve of your sales team, and I'm talking about every company right now, if you draw out a bell curve of the 80-20, then you'll see that the bell starts moving after every cycle. The top performer keeps changing his spots. He comes in the center of the bell and then he moves to the top and then he comes back. Someone else is topping the chart some months someone else. And sometimes the topper goes back in the bottom. That means that it was just pure talent and he should have performed every single time. There is a good day and there's a bad day. There's a good cycle and then there's a bad cycle. And actually that's not quite the problem of salesman, it's the problem of sales leadership. The leadership actually, it's called the moving bell effect. This is the first determination that, there's a big disconnect between the top management and the sales crew. So if you have a moving bell, or people are changing spots within the bell, that means that, that's the first indicator that there has to be a science behind how he did it the first time. Or whenever he does it, there's something that a lot of things go right for this guy. We want those things to go right for everybody. Right. And they have to know a science of how to perform better, how to stay on the right side of the bell. This is where source code comes into play, and this is where therapy actually installs itself gravely.
Okay, excellent. One more aspect we wanted to cover is from sales, just as we discussed basically, leadership. Let's talk about leaders. I mean, very, very, very close to that relative term. Leaders are born or made.
Or made.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah.
Well, source code answer is simple. Leaders are born or made. I'm going to talk about this, but followers are definitely made. They're not born. A human being is not born to follow. Okay, we're not sheep or cattle. Every human being actually has this innate ability to start to do his own thing. and challenge the status quo. It is the pressure of the paradigm that actually makes or suppresses that base instinct of ours. Otherwise there wouldn't be no evolution, no need of learning. But since there is, that means that we want to actually achieve way more than what we are right now. So that means that followers are made. That's rule one. So a leader, even if he is a born leader, he has to learn the science of doing it repeatedly over and over again successfully. So in other words, I practically believe that anyone can be made into a leader if you teach him, train him on the values and the science behind how to regulate the herd and keep that momentum going towards a purpose. See, the big problem right now is that the way I look at it, that there are only two kinds of people in the world. One with a definite purpose or search of a purpose, and they're living their life for it. And the other type of the people are the people who just do not have a purpose, they just live it daily or monthly in the corporate. And the big problem right now is that the second type, which have no purpose, most of that second type, or a lot of it, is in the leadership role. They do not have a purpose. And hence, the herd always is in a confused state. And since they do not know what the purpose of the leader is, hence the herd does not have a purpose itself. So as soon as the leader goes, they're in search of another situation that's going to go right or wrong. Or in other words, a new purpose. So a leader basically has to define a purpose statement. Hence, leader can be made. You know what I'm saying? And you have to choose a person who has a definite purpose for the herd. Once he has the benefit intact in his own being of the herd, then he's going to work for the herd.
Right. And
the weakest link will become the indicator of how good his leadership is, because he'll be focusing way more on the weakest link. This is why all the prophets in the planet, Allah Ta'ala sent all the prophet, and he trained all the prophets on how to herd their sheep, so that he wouldn't be able to distinguish between black sheep, white sheep, weak sheep, shepherd. Big sheep. Yeah, the shepherd. And this is base training. If leaders were just born, then why is God Almighty training all his own prophets? That means they were being made into a leader. I'm just giving you all the examples that I possibly can.
Where does the word, you've heard the term, he's got the charisma to his leadership. How much of a value now, after hearing so many things on the scientific approach to things, where does these words fit in? He's got the charisma, he's the leader, he's got that charismatic leadership, that...
Well, when we say charisma, we mean appeal.
Yeah.
Okay. Appeal means there are some certain indicators of a man that he's emotionally very intelligent. He is speaking to the hearts of the herd. That's what the science of charisma is. As soon as we look into the charisma from that angle, all of a sudden the fluid engineering concept opens up. And then you know that anyone can create a charisma if he knows that sort of an emotional science. And if he can regulate the right kind of chemicals inside the brain of his own group.
Very interesting. Okay. The fluids that run into a person, a human mind, that as discussed with you, fluid engineering, how did this inspire you, or is this part of your
leadership training?
Leadership training and part of your basic study, research work?
I think endocrinology is something which every leadership role has to have as a prerequisite. If he does not know that human beings are not solid entities, they're actually liquid animals, then he has no right to regulate anything. And he's not in a leadership role. He just has the authority. He does not have any sort of a play for the herd. And he's just using that whip just to get the people to the purpose. And people are not going to go, jive with this sort of model. Now, fluid engineering is something which is the base requisite of a leader. And if we look at all the people that are currently in leadership roles in countries and companies and wherever, you will see that they make mighty mistakes. And sometimes their charisma level goes up, their appeal level goes up, and then their rating goes down based on certain events. Just because, you know, the event is dictating his charisma rather than his own science of things.